Why would an airline deliberately avoid the aircraft that every other carrier uses for transatlantic flying? JetBlue has been operating flights to Europe since 2021. It's expanded to London, Paris, Amsterdam, Dublin, Edinburgh, Madrid, and now Barcelona and Milan. And they've done all of it without a single widebody aircraft in their fleet. That might sound like a temporary arrangement, a stopgap measure until the airline can afford the bigger jets. But according to JetBlue's own leadership, in 2021, widebodies are a long way off and not something we're thinking about at the moment. Well, it's not just about cost savings or fleet simplicity. It's a calculated strategy bet that challenges decades of conventional wisdom about how airlines should operate long-haul routes. And it's a bet that explicitly rejects the capital risk model that destroyed previous long-haul low-cost carriers like Norwegian or WOW Air. And to understand whether JetBlue's gamble will pay off, we need to look at why other carriers are making the exact opposite choice. Because while JetBlue says no to widebodies, Alaska Airlines is saying yes in a very big way. So, today, let's explore why JetBlue believes narrowbodies are the future of transatlantic flying, what the economics actually look like, and whether they're genuinely onto something or simply avoiding a necessary evolution. First, let's explain exactly what JetBlue is doing and why they believe it works. JetBlue currently operates a mix of Airbus A321LR and A321neo aircraft on its European routes. But the real game changer is the A321XLR, which the airline originally ordered 13 of, though it has since sold 2 delivery positions. The XLR stands for extra long range, and this aircraft can fly approximately 4,700 nautical miles. That's roughly 700 nautical miles more than the A321LR. It remains unclear whether JetBlue will actually take delivery of the A321XLR ever, with the airline deferring all A321neo family aircraft deliveries to 2030 and beyond. Now, to put that into context, the distance from New York JFK to London Heathrow is around 3,000 nautical miles. Boston to Paris is also about 3,000 nautical miles. So, even with the standard A321LR, JetBlue can comfortably serve most Western European destinations from its East Coast-focused cities. The XLR opens up even more possibilities. Destinations further into Southern or Central Europe become viable. But why would an airline choose a narrowbody over a widebody for these routes when every legacy carrier uses 787s, A350s, or at minimum, A330s? The answer comes down to 3 factors: capacity risk, fleet commonality, and premium revenue yield. Let's start with capacity risk. A typical widebody aircraft on transatlantic routes carries somewhere between 250 to 350 passengers, depending on the configuration. JetBlue's A321LR carries just 138 passengers in its Mint configuration, with 2 studio suites, 22 business class seats, and 114 economy seats. That might seem like a disadvantage. Fewer seats means fewer passengers per flight, which theoretically means less revenue. But here's the counterintuitive insight: smaller aircraft are easier to fill, and critically, the trip cost of a narrowbody transatlantic flight is much lower than that of a comparable widebody mission, which means the break-even load factor drops dramatically. When you're launching a new route or entering a market where you don't have established brand recognition, filling 138 seats is dramatically easier than filling 280 seats. If demand fluctuates seasonally, as transatlantic demand does, a smaller aircraft provides much more flexibility. Consider what happens if demand drops by 30% during the winter months. On a 280-seat widebody, that means 84 empty seats. On a 138-seat narrowbody, it's only 41 empty seats. The absolute revenue loss is smaller, and the airline can more easily adjust capacity by reducing frequencies rather than flying partially empty aircraft, or in JetBlue's case, deploying them on domestic routes. Robin Hayes, who was JetBlue's CEO when the European expansion launched, explicitly stated that the A321LR and A321XLR are a very, very efficient way of entering some of these new markets. Now, let's talk about fleet commonality, because this is where JetBlue's strategy gets particularly interesting. JetBlue operates an almost entirely Airbus narrowbody fleet. It has A220-300s, A320-200s, A321-200s, A321neos, and A321LRs. The Embraer E190s that were the only non-Airbus aircraft in the fleet were retired in 2025, leaving a pure Airbus operation. This uniformly provides enormous operational benefits. Pilots can transition between aircraft types with minimal additional training. Maintenance crews develop deep expertise in Airbus systems. Spare parts inventory can be consolidated. Ground equipment works across the fleet. Adding widebody aircraft would disrupt all of this. A Boeing 787 or an Airbus A350 requires completely different pilot type ratings, different maintenance certifications, different ground equipment, different spare parts. The airline would need to establish entirely new training programs, hire or retrain maintenance technicians, and potentially negotiate new union agreements for wide-body operations. But perhaps the most crucial element of JetBlue's strategy is its Mint business class product and how it transforms narrow-body economics. Traditional airline economics on long-haul routes assume that business class passengers generate the majority of premium revenue, but they occupy relatively few seats. Economy passengers fill the cabin, but contribute less per seat. JetBlue has essentially inverted this ratio. Their A321LR Mint configuration dedicates 24 of 138 seats to business class seats, including the 2 suites. That's roughly 17% of the aircraft. On JetBlue's transatlantic narrowbodies, the Mint cabin generates roughly 66% of flight revenue, while occupying only 17% of the capacity. This changes the entire revenue equation. JetBlue doesn't need to fill 280 economy seats to make a route profitable. They need to fill 24 premium seats and have reasonable economy loads. The trade-off is that JetBlue forfeits virtually all cargo revenue, but the airline has calculated that the simplicity benefits and premium passenger yields more than offset the lost freight income. The Mint product itself has been extensively refined. Each business class seat features a fully lie-flat bed, a privacy door, and significantly more personal space than most legacy carrier business class products. The 1-1 configuration means every passenger has both a window and an aisle. JetBlue claims it's the best business class product flying across the Atlantic, and many reviewers agree. Now, here's where things get interesting from a competitive perspective. While JetBlue doubles down on narrowbodies, Alaska Airlines is making the exact opposite bet, and the contrast couldn't be more striking. Alaska has ordered up to 17 Boeing 787 Dreamliners, with 5 aircraft already in service. It's expanded their 787 order book multiple times, most recently adding 5 more in January 2026. And it's converted some former Hawaiian Airlines 787-9 orders to the larger 787-10 variant, which can carry up to 336 passengers in a standard 2-class configuration. Alaska plans to launch London Heathrow service on May 21, 2026, and seasonal Rome flights starting April 2026, using its wide-body fleet. Why is Alaska going the opposite direction from JetBlue? Part of the answer is its merger with Hawaiian Airlines, completed in September 2024, which brought wide-body aircraft and long-haul expertise into the combined carrier. But the strategic rationale goes deeper. Alaska is building Seattle as a major long-haul gateway, with plans to serve at least 12 intercontinental destinations from the airport by 2030. Its network model depends on connecting domestic passengers through Seattle to international destinations. For that strategy to work, it needs wide-body capacity on trunk routes where demand is sufficient to fill larger aircraft. It's also planning to open a dedicated pilot base for 787 operations at Seattle in March 2026, demonstrating the operational investment required to support wide-body flying. David Neeleman, who founded JetBlue in 1999, offered an interesting perspective on the airline's European strategy in a 2024 interview with Simple Flying. When asked whether JetBlue's transatlantic expansion was a good move, Neeleman expressed strong support for the A321LR as an aircraft, but he raised a critical concern about seasonality. Europe's just really seasonal, and you make money at certain times of the year, and you don't make it other times of the year. Neeleman suggested that it might have made sense for JetBlue to acquire widebodies when they were inexpensive a few years ago. The idea would be to fly those widebodies to the Caribbean during winter months, carrying both passengers and cargo, and then redeploy them to Europe during peak summer demand. He referenced his experience at TAP Air Portugal, where deploying A321LRs during off-peak seasons made a significant positive difference to economics. But he acknowledged uncertainty about JetBlue's profitability on European routes, saying simply, "I'm not sure how profitable it is." This is a nuanced critique. Neeleman isn't saying narrowbodies are wrong for transatlantic flying, he's questioning whether JetBlue has the fleet flexibility to optimize asset utilization across seasons. JetBlue's counterargument, outlined on its jet-forward strategy, is precisely this. The A321LR can be redeployed to domestic mint routes, like JFK LAX, or warm-weather leisure destinations during winter, something a wide-body fleet could not do efficiently. Despite these questions, JetBlue continues expanding in Europe. In 2026, the airline plans up to 13 European routes, all operating from New York JFK and Boston. They're adding Barcelona and Milan to its network, and Milan will become JetBlue's longest route. The airline will serve 9 European airports and operate up to 14 daily departures across the Atlantic. JetBlue's Boston operation is particularly strong. Next summer, it'll operate 9 daily departures from Boston to Europe, though they'll still be second to Delta Airlines at that airport. The airline is clearly finding traction with this model. So, where does this leave JetBlue's widebody question? The honest answer is that nobody knows for certain whether the narrowbody transatlantic model will prove durably profitable. JetBlue is essentially running a large-scale experiment, and the results will take years to fully materialize. Several scenarios could unfold. If transatlantic demand remains strong, and JetBlue continues flying mint cabins at premium fares, the current model could work indefinitely. The airline would keep growing within the narrowbody envelope, adding routes and frequencies as demand justifies. If demand surges beyond what narrowbodies can accommodate, JetBlue might face capacity constraints. At that point, it would need to either add massive frequencies, which creates scheduling complexity, or reconsider widebodies. If other carriers aggressively compete with widebody capacity on JetBlue's best routes, unit revenue could come under pressure. A competitor offering 280 seats at similar fares creates yield challenges, even if JetBlue's smaller aircraft are full. And if fuel prices spike dramatically, the efficiency advantage of newer aircraft like the A321neo could actually favor JetBlue compared to carriers flying older widebodies. JetBlue isn't the only carrier exploring long-haul narrowbody flying. American Airlines has begun A321XLR service and is launching its first transatlantic route, New York to Edinburgh, in March 2026. Aer Lingus and Iberia use the A321LR and A321XLRs on certain routes. Azores Airlines, TAP Air Portugal, Icelandair, SAS, and others are also flying transatlantic routes with the A321neo or A321LR. The trend is clear. Long-haul narrowbody flying is growing, not shrinking. This validates at least part of JetBlue's thesis. Technology has genuinely enabled narrowbodies to serve routes that previously required widebodies. Whether that shift represents the future of transatlantic flying or simply a niche strategy remains to be seen. So, what should we make of JetBlue's widebody resistance? On one hand, their strategy shows genuine innovation. It's built a premium-focused product that generates strong revenue from small aircraft. It's maintained fleet simplicity that reduces operational complexity, and it's grown European service without the capital intensity of widebody acquisition. On the other hand, there are legitimate questions about long-term scalability, seasonal asset utilization, and competitive positioning if larger carriers decide to fight aggressively on JetBlue's routes. And the GTF engine crisis has highlighted the concentrated risk of an all-narrowbody, single-engine type fleet. The contrast with Alaska Airlines is instructive. Both carriers are expanding internationally. Both face the same fundamental question about aircraft size, and they've reached opposite conclusions. Perhaps both are right for their specific situations. Alaska has Seattle as a connecting hub and inherited widebody expertise through the Hawaiian merger. JetBlue has premium branding through Mint and a point-to-point network model. But I'm curious what you think. Is JetBlue's narrowbody strategy genuinely innovative, or are they simply delaying an inevitable transition to widebodies? Hey, before you go, the YouTube algorithm thinks you're going to like this video next, so why not check it out?